Casio just sold out a watch within hours of listing it, and most people have no idea it even existed. That is the thing about this brand. They move quietly. No big Fashion Week press conferences. No celebrity campaigns with $100 million budget. They just drop something, and the people paying attention lose their minds. And everyone else finds out 6 months later when the resale price is double. 2026 is turning into one of those years. There are releases already confirmed, unexpected shifts, and one move that, if Casio plays it right, could be the most emotionally resonant thing they have done in decades. We are going to go through all of it, ranked from interesting all the way up to the one we think matters most. Let us start. GWB X5600C B G2. The watch made from the ocean. April 2026, Earth Day. Casio drops a limited edition square G-Shock, and the band is made from recycled fishing nets pulled out of the ocean. Sit with that sentence for a second, because it should sound strange. It does not. The GWBX 5600C BG2 sits inside the broader BX5600 line, which Casio first tested in 2025. That debut model was already interesting. It brought the MIP display to the classic square case and added multi-band 6 radio calibration, which means the watch corrects its own time automatically, 4 times a day, without you touching anything. The 2026 Earth Day version takes that same foundation and wraps it in something that tells a story before you even put it on. Let's talk about the MIP display for a moment, because it matters more than Casio's marketing sometimes lets on. MIP stands for Memory in Pixel. What it actually does is hold an image on screen without the display needing to constantly refresh it. The result is a screen that stays on all the time, stays readable in blinding sunlight, and barely drains the battery doing it. If you have ever been outside on a bright day, tried to check your standard G-Shock, and had to angle your wrist 3 different ways before you could read anything, MIP is the fix. It is not a cosmetic upgrade. It is a functional one that the original LCD simply cannot match. And now you can get all of that in a watch whose strap was literally retrieved from the seafloor. Here is the thing about this release that most people will get wrong. They will call it a sustainability gimmick, a green sticker on the packaging, a way to attract the environmentally conscious buyer without really changing anything. But the GWB X5600CB G2 is not structured that way. The material itself is the story. You are not buying a watch with a pamphlet about Casio's environmental goals. You are wearing something that used to float at the bottom of the ocean, processed into a strap that genuinely holds up to 200 meters of water resistance. That is not messaging. That is engineering. The question worth asking is whether the average G-Shock buyer cares about that. Honestly, some of them do not, and Casio knows that. This watch is not pitched at the person who has been buying G-Shocks for 20 years. It is pitched at a different person entirely. The buyer who cares about where materials come from, who has been looking for an entry point into the G-Shock world that feels aligned with their values. That person exists, and they are underserved by the watch industry. And Casio just handed them a reason to come in. Drop a comment. Does the recycled band story actually change how you feel about a watch? Or is it irrelevant to your decision? The next one on this list solves a problem that G-Shock loyalists have lived with for years without anyone admitting it was a problem. GM H5600. The square that finally does everything. 1983. An engineer drops a watch from a 4-story building. The DW 5000C hits the pavement and keeps running. G-Shock is born. The square case becomes one of the most recognizable watch silhouettes in history. And for the next 4 decades, that square case stayed more or less exactly what it was. Tough, reliable, accurate, and affordable. The shape of 100 versions and 1,000 colorways, but always fundamentally the same thing underneath. The GM H5600, which became official on Casio Singapore's and Casio Japan's product pages on March 2026, is the first time the square case has been given a stainless steel bezel alongside a full suite of health tracking. Not a resin body with metal accents, a proper metal-covered square, with an optical heart rate sensor built into the carbon fiber reinforced caseback. An MIP display with blood oxygen measurement, sleep tracking across 6 stages with a scored recovery metric, GPS-corrected distance for runs, and the full Polar smartwatch library integration for training analysis. The price in Japan is 71,600 yen, which works out to around $450. Two colorways at launch, silver and gold tone. The case measures 51.5 by 44 by 16.5 millimeters. It is not a thin watch. The health sensors require space, and the case back is thicker than a standard 5,600. But the weight is 63 grams, lighter than you would expect for a full stainless bezel construction, because the bio-based resin case body and strap carry a meaningful part of the load. The bands are made from plant-derived materials, which Casio has been working into multiple lines this year. Here is what this watch actually represents, though, and it is not about the spec sheet. There is a person, many of them, who has been wearing a G-Shock Square since it was the only watch they could afford. They grew up with the 5,600 shape. It is theirs in a way that goes beyond brand loyalty. They are not going to switch to an Apple Watch or a Garmin because those things look like they belong on someone else's wrist. The Square is non-negotiable. For the last several years, Casio has been building impressive health-tracking G-Shocks. The G-Squad line has heart rate monitors, activity logs, polar integration, and genuinely sophisticated fitness tools. But they all lived in different bodies. Larger cases, rounder profiles, and aesthetics that did not carry the same identity as the original Square. The GM H5600 is the first one that has all of that, whose silhouette has not fundamentally changed since 1983. The shape stays, and the technology arrives. For the long-term G-Shock buyer, that is not a small upgrade. That is a decade's worth of patience finally being answered. The gold tone colorway is particularly interesting. IP coating on the bezel for scratch resistance, and aesthetically, it sits somewhere between sport and dress, in a way that the silver does not. The person who buys the gold GM H5600 is making a different statement than the person who buys the silver. Both are making the same fundamental decision. I want the Square, and I want it to do more. The next watch is Casio, thinking about light, specifically what happens when you angle it just right. The Summer Reflection Polarized Series, GMA P2100SR, and GM S2110SR. Tilt these watches under a lamp. Pink bleeds into orange, and green shifts to blue. The face looks like it is holding the light, rather than simply reflecting it. It changes depending on where you are standing, what the room is doing, and how far you tilt your wrist. This is what the Summer Reflection series does, and it launched in April 2026 across two lines. The GMA P2100SR uses the Casio silhouette, the octagonal case that became a phenomenon after the GA2100 launched, and somehow ended up on the wrists of people who had never thought about buying a G-Shock before. The GM S2110SR is the metal bezel Square, the slightly dressier proposition. Both carry polarized vapor deposition glass applied directly to the face of the watch, in a process that creates the color shifting effect. 4 models total, pink and orange, green and blue, in both cases. Here is the observation that does not make it into most coverage of this series. The Casio grew its audience through a very specific kind of appeal, the shape. Before most people knew anything about G-Shock, they responded to the octagon. It looked considered without looking expensive. It wore well with streetwear, and it wore well with a suit. Fashion people picked it up because of the silhouette, not the spec sheet. The risk Casio faces with that audience is that fashion moves. A colorway that feels current in April can feel dated by September. The polarized treatment solves that problem in a way that a simple pastel run cannot, because the color shift is a material behavior, not a static choice. The watch looks different in your kitchen than it does outside. It looks different in the morning than it does at night. It keeps being interesting in a way that a single solid tone eventually stops being. That is a more durable sales argument than most colorway releases in this lineup have had. The retail price in Japan sits at 19,800 yen for the GMA P2100SR models. The GM S2110SR lands at 30,250 yen, which, converted, puts it well above $200. For a G-Shock, that is a deliberate positioning. Casio is not selling this as an impulse buy. They are presenting it as something worth keeping. The next watch on this list moved fast. It was gone before most people finished their morning coffee. GMC B2100A DS1A, the silver dial full metal Casio. April 2026, the 6th edition of the GMC B2100 series, and the first one to do something nobody in the lineup had done before. The GMC B2100A DS1A carries a vapor-deposited silver dial, a process where a metallic layer is applied to the dial surface through a vacuum deposition technique, creating a shimmer and depth that standard printing cannot achieve. Every previous full metal Casio has worked in darker territory: blacks, bronzes, deep blue. This one opens the palette towards something cleaner, more reflective, and in a way, more versatile. The rest of the spec sheet is what you expect from a full metal GMC model. Stainless steel construction throughout, tough solar charging, no battery to replace, ever. Bluetooth for syncing with the Casio app, which handles time zone correction automatically. The octagonal bezel made the GA2100 a cultural moment and then kept being a cultural moment for 3 straight years. Let's talk about that shape and what has happened to it, because there is a real risk here that Casio either manages brilliantly or mishandles entirely. The original GA2100 was an accident of relevance. It came out, caught on with people who had no prior interest in G-Shock, showed up in streetwear photography, got tagged on social media, and suddenly became the face of accessible style consciousness at the affordable end of the watch market. That shape carried enormous weight. The GMC B2100, the full metal version, is the premium expression of that same DNA. It is what you buy when you want the Casio identity on your wrist, but with the kind of finish that does not read as entry-level. And 6 editions in, the line is healthy. The silver dial creates visual distance from the previous models without abandoning the form. It is the version that sits differently against a white shirt or a pale linen jacket. It has a seasonality that the darker editions do not. What Casio needs to watch, and the silver dial signals they understand this, is that the GMC line stays worth it. The Casio shape has equity because of what it means, not just what it looks like. As long as the metal editions feel premium and distinct, the line holds its position. When they stop feeling special, the whole pyramid weakens. So far, so good. The listing was confirmed on Casio Japan's official site ahead of the April launch, and pre-orders moved quickly. The silver dial, apparently, was exactly what a segment of the market was waiting for. The next entry is a prediction, and if Casio gets it right, it might be the most personally meaningful thing they release all year. The Casio Calculator Watch Tribute. This one requires a little context. Bear with it because the payoff matters. 1965. A machine the size of a typewriter, built in Tokyo, changes how the world does arithmetic. The Casio 001 was the first electronic desktop calculator to have memory functions. Before it, calculation meant labor. You had to hold intermediate results in your head, on paper, or on an abacus. After it, you pressed a button, and the machine held the number for you. The concept of accessible computing, the idea that calculation could belong to everyone, not just offices and universities, begins here, not in Silicon Valley. In a building in Tokyo, made by people who believed that making one useful thing well was enough of a reason to exist. 60 years later, Casio is marking the anniversary with appropriate seriousness. In April 2025, they released the MS20UCJ series, commemorative calculator models with traditional Japanese patterns, available in 3 designs. In March 2026, they went further. A premium desktop calculator called the Special One arrived with a traditional Japanese lacquer finish, a process that takes a full month to complete. Inside a shaved aluminum body with tactile concave keys. $600 for a calculator, and people paid for it because the story behind it was worth it. They also announced 25 new design calculators in late 2025, a full line refresh built for people who think about what lives on their desk. Smoky tones, pastels, two-tone finishes, calculators positioned as design objects. Casio is treating this anniversary the way watch collectors treat a reference they love, with craft and intent, not just nostalgia. Now here is the prediction. Casio does not let milestone years pass without a wrist piece. The G-Shock 40th anniversary produced limited editions that sold out globally, They understand anniversaries as products, not just occasions, and there is a natural equivalent here. The calculator watch, the databank, and the CA-53W are among the most culturally embedded objects Casio has ever made. Marty McFly wore a calculator watch across 3 Back to the Future films. Every person who grew up in the 80s or 90s has a memory attached to that form factor. The tiny buttons, the dual-function display, and the feeling of pointing at your wrist and pressing a key like you were operating the future. Think about what that felt like in 1985. You were 10 years old, and your watch could do mathematics. Nobody else's watch could do mathematics. You were, for the duration of primary school, the most technologically advanced person in your postcode. The current CA-53W is still sold today, largely unchanged from its original design. The same basic logic, the same casing, the same tactile button setup, at a price that keeps it accessible to anyone. It is a genuinely charming object, and its unchanged nature is partly what makes it charming. But it has never been given a premium treatment. No sapphire crystal, no metal case with proper finishing, and no limited edition made in Japan with the same care that goes into the full metal GMW or the MRGB series. The form has been preserved. It has never been elevated. Based on Casio's anniversary release patterns, and based on the scale and seriousness of the 60th anniversary celebration already underway, a commemorative calculator wristwatch is expected in the second half of 2026, likely Q3 or Q4. The 60th anniversary special website is still prominently featured across Casio's properties. The calculator line refresh signals sustained marketing attention. The premium desktop model confirms they are willing to charge premium prices for a premium treatment of this heritage. If they build a limited edition calculator watch, proper metal construction, Japanese manufacturing, exhibition caseback, and the original databank-style functionality preserved, it will sell out. Not because of the specs, but because of the memory attached to the shape. Because the 10-year-old who pressed those tiny buttons and felt like they were carrying the future is in their 40s now, has disposable income, and has never been given a grown-up version of that feeling. That is the watch Casio could make. The question is whether they make it this year. If you missed the pre-order window for this next watch, I am sorry. This one is going to haunt secondary market prices for a while. GMW BZ5000RC 1. The watch built by 40 years of data. The 3rd of April 2026. Japan, the United Kingdom, and China. Gone before the day was over. Pre-orders for the GMW BZ5000RC1 sold out on the first day at the official Casio Japan store. Casio China, Bic Camera, and Yodobashi Camera, some of the largest electronics retailers in Japan. These are stores that are very good at managing demand. They do not run out of things on the first day unless something genuinely extraordinary happened. 121,000 yen, roughly $760. Made in Japan at the Yamagata Casio plant, the same factory that produced the original DW5000C in 1983. Limited production, no restock announced. The watch is a full metal square, the same GMW BZ5000 platform that already has a strong collector following, but with a rainbow ion-plated finish on the center case. Not the bezel, the center case. That distinction matters more than it might sound. Most rainbow-treated watches announce themselves from across the room. The gradient goes on the bezel, the first thing you see, and it reads as deliberate and maximalist from every angle. The BZ5000RC does something different. From the front, you see the angular face of the original G-Shock, largely unchanged from 1983. But tilt it to the side, catch it in the right light, flip it to the back, and the rainbow IP on the center case reveals itself in a way the front view does not prepare you for. It does not shout, it shows itself when you look for it. Casio also said something remarkable. The colors on each individual watch are unique. No two examples carry the same gradation. The two-stage ion plating process, a base layer of gold IP, then a gradient rainbow layer on top, produces slightly different results every time. That is an unusual claim for a mass-market brand to make publicly, and it is the kind of claim that only a piece you hold in your hands can prove. But the engineering story underneath the finish is worth as much as anything visible on the surface. Casio stated explicitly in official product materials that this watch was designed using artificial intelligence, not vaguely. Their engineering team fed more than 40 years of G-Shock shock resistance test data into a generative design model, cross-referenced structural stress results at a scale no individual team could manually process, and used the output to optimize the physical geometry of the case. The result is a full stainless steel construction that still passes G-Shock's shock resistance benchmark, which is genuinely difficult to achieve. Metal does not flex the way resin does. The original G-Shock survived drops because the case was built to absorb impact through controlled deformation. Metal fights that process. The AI-assisted design figured out how the resin internal protector should sit within the steel case so that force travels around the movement rather than through it. 40 years of drop tests processed into a geometry that no human engineering team would have arrived at alone. Casio chose to make this case publicly on a flagship limited edition rather than burying it in internal documentation. They want the claim associated with the brand. If this becomes the standard for how premium G-Shocks are engineered going forward, the BZ5000RC, one will not just be a collectible, it will be the one people point to when they explain when the approach started. The resale market has already moved. People who missed the pre-order are paying well above retail to secure one. This last watch is the reason we think 2026 might be the year Casio changes how the entire watch world thinks about them. Stay with this. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. You walk into a store or browse online, and everything looks the same, but behind the scenes, there's a system. Prices aren't always fair, availability is controlled, and one bad decision can leave you overpaying for something that doesn't even hold its value. That's why I created a complete free insider guide to buying watches. Inside, you'll find the best watches to buy, the watches to avoid, and how to choose a watch that actually fits your style and budget long term. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the free guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Casio Edifice EFK110D, a mechanical watch that should not cost this little. In 2025, Casio did something that the watch industry had not fully prepared for. A company that built its reputation entirely on quartz, on digital movements, solar charging, radio-synchronized atomic time, and shock-resistant resin, released its first automatic mechanical watch, the EFK100, an edifice, a Japanese automatic movement, an exhibition caseback, a sapphire crystal, and a textured dial made through a specialist electroforming process. Under $300. The watch world's reaction was somewhere between surprise and skepticism. Casio had spent 50 years through every product decision, making the argument that mechanical movements were an indulgence that precision did not require. Their entire engineering philosophy had been oriented around the idea that quartz was more accurate, more reliable, and more practical than gears. Building a mechanical watch felt, to some observers, like a contradiction. But the EFK100 was real, and it was good, and it sold. Quietly, without a campaign, without celebrity placement or influencer boxes, or any of the noise that typically accompanies a watch launch that is trying to create the impression of demand. The EFK100 sold because people who bought it told other people about it, and those people went and looked and then bought one too. That is the oldest form of product success, and it is still the most reliable one. Then came the EFK110D. Released in March 2026, available now across European markets at €279, roughly $330. Same price tier as its predecessor. Different watch. The movement has changed, where the EFK100 used the Seiko NH35, an extremely capable, widely trusted automatic caliber that you will find inside dozens of watches at this price point. The EFK110D uses a Miyota automatic from Japan. 42 hours of power reserve on a full wind, 21 joules. A hacking seconds function, meaning the seconds hand stops when you pull the crown, allowing you to set the time precisely against a reference. These are not headline specifications. They are the right specifications for what this watch is trying to be. The case dimensions changed, too, and this is the detail I want to dwell on for a moment. The EFK110D measures 43 by 38 by 11.8 millimeters thick. The EFK100 was 43.5 by 39 by 12.5 millimeters. In watch terms, that reduction in thickness, from 12.5 to 11.8 millimeters, is the difference between a watch that sits on top of your wrist and a watch that lives on it. The EFK110D will slide under a shirt cuff without announcing itself. The EFK100, for some buyers, would not. Casio heard that feedback and responded in the very next generation. The sapphire crystal is still there. The exhibition caseback is still there. You can see the movement through the mineral glass window in the back. The dial is still textured through that electroforming process, which creates a depth of surface that photographs genuinely struggle to represent. 3 colorways: black, green, white. All 3 use the same silver tone stainless steel case and bracelet with satin finished and polished surfaces. The bracelet is worth mentioning specifically because it keeps getting praised in reviews in ways that feel almost surprised. The consensus on the EFK100's bracelet was unexpectedly positive. Solid links, proper weight, and a clasp that functions like it belongs on a watch twice the price. The EFK110D carries this forward. For a sub-$350 watch, the bracelet experience matters more than most people admit, and Casio is getting it right. Now, here is the thing I actually want you to take away from this section. The EFK100 was Casio testing whether there was a market for their name on a mechanical watch. The EFK110D is Casio deciding they are in the mechanical watch business now. These are not the same thing. A test gets one attempt. A commitment gets iterations. The fact that they changed the movement supplier, refined the dimensions, expanded European distribution faster, and released the follow-up within a year of the original launch, that is not the behavior of a brand running an experiment. That is the behavior of a brand that checked whether the foundation was solid, found that it was, and started building on it. The Seiko collector knows this feeling. Watch Seiko's entry-level mechanical line from the early 2000s and compare it to where those models are now. The citizen collector knows it. When a Japanese engineering brand with deep technical credibility decides to take mechanical watchmaking seriously, the watches that come out in the first years of that commitment tend to become the ones that people regret not buying at retail. The EFK110D is the second G-Shock mechanical. Casio has been making quartz watches since before most watch collectors were born. A year ago, they had never made a mechanical. Now they are on their second. The trajectory of that development matters more than the spec sheet of any single model. The person who buys an EFK110D in the spring of 2026 is buying more than a well-made watch for $300. They are buying a position in what might be the most unexpected pivot in modern watch history. The company that said accuracy belongs to quartz, learning to make something powered by nothing but a coil spring and the motion of your wrist. That is a story worth owning a piece of. Number 1. Nothing else close. So here is where 2026 actually leaves us with Casio. They are not picking one direction and going all in. They are building lanes, one for the fashion buyer, one for the fitness buyer, one for the mechanical watch buyer who never considered Casio before, and one for the collector who wants something that sold out the day it launched. Each release on this list is pointed at a specific person, solving a specific problem, without asking any of those people to compromise. That is harder to do than it looks. Most brands that try to speak to everyone end up sounding like no one. Casio keeps its voice across all of it. The same values underneath, the same refusal to be flashy for the sake of it, the same instinct toward making something durable before making it beautiful. This year just shows how many different people those values actually speak to. Which of these 7 is the one you are most excited about? One word in the comments. We genuinely want to know. And if there is a 2026 Casio release we missed that you think deserves a spot on this list, tell us that too. If you found something here that surprised you, hit like and subscribe. It takes 2 seconds, and it means we can keep making videos like this.